Conservatives, the UK had been expected to try and challenge it, but will Labour? Also tonight, promises that consumers could save up to £300 a year on energy bills as he announces a new deal to boost his Great British Energy Plan. I'll be asking environmental campaigner Del Vince about the new plans and what he thinks about Heathrow expansion and jail sentences for protesters. While MPs vote to let thousands of prisoners out early as violence and self-harm soars in overcrowded jails. Testing political knowledge. We will have a quiz with a special guest, Count Binface. All that and more with the broadcaster Nick Ferrari and the Labour MP Dawn Butler, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday. I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, Downing Street are insisting tonight that they are in lockstep with America when it comes to supporting Israel and its right to self-defence. That's what Keir Starmer's government is saying, at least. But is it true? Because tomorrow the UK faces a deadline in relation to the Israeli Prime Minister. The International Criminal Court is seeking an arrest warrant for him over alleged war crimes during the war in Gaza. Now, when the Conservatives were in power, the UK government was in lockstep with America, and it was against the warrant. But there are reports in the US that Keir Starmer may be about to change that position and no longer try and challenge the court. If that happens, it could be seen as the UK choosing to take a different path to the US. But there's not long until we find out, because the UK has to decide whether to put in its challenge or not by tomorrow. Now, Mattel aren't saying tonight which way they go, but they are saying that they are looking at the previous government's position. So, Benjamin Netanyahu is currently in the United States on a visit. Last night, he was criticising the International Criminal Court during a speech in Congress. And he's also tonight been meeting the US President Joe Biden. Well, here to explain what's going on is our correspondent David Blevins, who is in Washington for us tonight. David, what meetings are happening today then?
Well, Joe Biden, the president who, of course, effectively passed the baton to Kamala Harris, his vice president, as the Democratic candidate in that address to the nation last night, is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu as we speak. The Israeli Prime Minister has thanked him for 50 years of support for the state of Israel. But I think it would be fair to describe these talks as awkward for Joe Biden. He has already expressed some exasperation with his Israeli counterpart in relation to how Benjamin Netanyahu has been fairly relaxed, too relaxed in the view of the Americans, regarding efforts to broker a ceasefire and facilitate fresh peace talks in the Middle East. They see it as a failure that the hostages have not come home and that there is still this ongoing conflict in Gaza. But in many ways, the focus will shift very quickly to a meeting due in the next couple of hours between the Israeli Prime Minister and Kamala Harris, because she's paved the way to that meeting by condemning pro-Palestinian protests here in Washington yesterday as he was addressing Congress. But many think that's because while she will support Israel's right to defend itself from the threat posed by Hamas, she will also urge him to seriously engage with those efforts to bring about a ceasefire and bring to an end what she regards as a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
And David, I'm interested to get your view on whether or not there is, I guess a split is too strong a word, but if there is any difference between Keir Starmer's position on Gaza and the US's.
Well, if there is, the Americans are not talking about it yet, and if there is, they will be deeply concerned about that. It would be the most sensitive shift by this Labour government away from a policy previously held by the Conservative government. The Tories were fiercely opposed to efforts to bring Benjamin Netanyahu before the International Criminal Court, and until now we understood that Labour were also in that position. They're not confirming reports in the New York Times that they've changed position, but they're not denying them either, instead just focusing on the fact that they respect the independence of the International Criminal Court. But I think it's worth reflecting as we talk about that issue on the fact that for the second time in 2 days, Benjamin Netanyahu referred to Joe Biden today as the Irish Irish-American Zionist. That won't play very well back in Ireland because, remember, Ireland was one of the first places to formally recognise the state of Palestine. So he will be concerned now that perhaps the British government is moving closer to the position held by the Irish government and other places in Europe, being so concerned about what's going on in the Middle East that they no longer oppose efforts to bring Benjamin Netanyahu before the International Criminal Court.
David, thank you very much indeed. David Blevins there in Washington for us. Well, let's bring in our duo for this evening, shall we? The broadcaster Nick Ferrari and the Labour MP Dawn Butler. Great to have you both here with us this evening. Dawn, what's your sense about where this government is in relation to Israel and the war in Gaza?
Well, I was just kind of looking up the Foreign Secretary's words because I think it's important to get it absolutely correct. And he said, this is a quasi-legal process and it's important that I follow the actions in an appropriate way. So I believe that there will be some announcements made. And I also believe that there may be publishing the legal advice as well. So I think they're treading very carefully to make sure everything's done in the correct manner.
I mean, they have to tread carefully, don't they, Nick? It's such a delicate... I mean, yeah, your face says it all.
Absolutely.
It's such a delicate issue.
Look, how do you bring about peace in a situation like this, whether domestically there's issues that we had in Northern Ireland or we look at... You do it by talking and you do it by getting people around tables that actually might not even like each other, but the only way you're going to bring about an end to this horrific conflict that's cost too many lives on both sides is to have people talk. I would have thought an extraordinary inflammatory action by the UK at this time would be a backward step. I can't imagine that Sir Keir would want to do that. I would have thought he's the sort of person who would want to keep all the channels open. Obviously, David Lammy will have, Foreign Secretary, will have sight of them. It might be as and when quite helpful for others to have sight of that, but I would urge caution because the last thing, and I realise that, and as I'm saying this, for many people, Netanyahu is an international pariah. I get that, but at the moment he is the Prime Minister, and if you're going to get a deal, you've got to keep him in the room, and that's what I would urge.
What's your... I'm interested, Dawn, on your sense on, I guess, the pressure that Labour feels that it's under to get this right, because there was clearly a lot of anger expressed by voters when it comes to Gaza at the election, and particularly directed towards Labour as well, for not being, in many voters' minds, tough enough.
I think it's really vital and important that not only is it right, but also, like, we hit the right decision. October the 7th was an atrocity. Hamas are terrorists. Israel has the right to defend herself. We have seen the devastation in Gaza with, at the moment, an estimated 36,000 people dead, many of them women and children. Nobody who watches those images of what's happening can say that that's a proportionate response. So I think it is important if there's legal advice that it is published. It's important if there's been any breaches that that's then tackled. And I also think it's important that the ICC ruling isn't actually challenged because we take the rule of law seriously. And I think the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said that he does. So I'm hoping that would be the outcome.
It's interesting, on a slightly different note, to see President Biden meeting with Netanyahu. He's obviously said that he's going to sort of step down, that he's not going to fight the upcoming election. Do you think he's at risk of seeing a bit of a, I guess, a lame duck president now?
Oh, totally. I mean, I find it quite extraordinary. He can't run for election, but he can run the country. I mean, discuss. I find that quite extraordinary.
It's only for a few more weeks.
But he's still running one of the most powerful countries. Most powerful.
But he's just stepping, you know, he's just stepping down. It's not that he's... can we say, like, I'm stepping down? So that, I think that's fine.
Well, no one's going to listen to him now, are they? Everyone's going to be preparing for whoever the new man or woman is at the end of the year. To Sophie's point was, is he a lame duck? Of course he's a lame duck.
Yeah, but there's
he
always...
has zero power
But there's
now.
always a period, especially in American politics, where there's a lame duck.
But it's an extended period.
Even in our period. Even in our politics, there's always a period where there's a bit of a lame duckery.
The minute a boss says he's standing down, whether he's a newspaper editor, a TV proprietor, the minute they say, he or she says, I'm standing down, the power's gone. So come on, that's a natural dynamic.
So then the solution is he stands down and Kamala takes over now?
I don't know. I mean, this should have happened last year.
Yeah, but...
The very fact that the the Democratic Party have tried to pull over the wool, over the eyes, not just of Americans. Everybody on the planet could see that poor man. And I have nothing but sympathy for the man. Let me get that straight. I have nothing but sympathy for Joe Biden. You can clearly see the man had issues. They should never have done this, and it's a disservice to the democratic, with a small d, the democratic process in the US.
But I think the situation is what it is.
Well, I agree.
think
I'm not going to argue with that one.
He says he's stepping down. Kamala's like
he's
the
got
vice
no power.
president.
He means,
I'm
I'm
still
sure
got power. He's
I'm
the
sure
president.
they'll have a nice chat and there'll be the fireside pictures and everything will be good. But the power broker is obviously the vice president, or the man if he's not in court, the other fella.
What were our predictions then with the election then? Who do you think is going to win, Dawn?
Well, I actually think Kamala's campaign video that I watched today was so sort of
What did you learn?
So hopeful.
What did you learn?
OK, this is the thing, right? I think you get so used to the doom and gloom and the hate in politics that when you see something that's
It was like a pop
when
video.
you see something,
It was Britney, wasn't it?
It was Beyonce.
Beyonce, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Britney.
But it is a bloody pop video. What did you learn?
It wasn't. You know what I learned? I learned that she's hopeful. I learned that she's talking about freedom of a woman to choose what she does with her body. She's talking about people not shooting each other and getting rid of guns. That is something that we haven't heard for a long time, and I think it's a hopeful message.
People always talk about
OK.
reform. Sorry.
OK, I'm going to dive in at this point.
Count Binface to win the US presidency. Get him over to Washington.
That one
Count
first.
Binface.
Right, let's talk domestic politics now, shall we? Because one of the big challenges for the new government, for some the biggest challenge, is climate change. GB Energy is the big idea from Sir Keir Starmer, a new state-owned energy firm that we're promised will help cut bills too. But what is it, and is it going to work? Well, today he announced a new partnership with the Crown Estate to create new investments. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports.
There's a lot of work to do in building a zero-carbon electricity system for the UK. And for the people at Hutchinson Engineering in Widnes, that's a good thing. They make the cylindrical steel towers for giant offshore wind turbines. Also, why the Prime Minister and his Energy Secretary came here to launch GB Energy, a state-owned renewable company they've promised will create jobs and lower bills through homegrown clean electricity.
I don't just want to be in the race for clean energy. I want us to win the race. We've got the people, the skills, and now we've got a mission-driven government determined to take advantage of these opportunities.
A new partnership between GB Energy and the Crown Estate that leases the seabed to wind developers will, says the government, speed the time it takes to get structures like this up and working. But GB Energy has just £8.3 billion to invest, and even with today's deal, it'll take years to build much of the clean energy promised.
Can you be at all confident in your pledge to voters that you will lower their bills in the short term?
Yes, and I'll tell you for why. The money that's going into GB Energy is intended to be a catalyst for private investment.
They're banking on other changes too that could reward consumers for backing renewables.
A key plank of the government's GB Energy plans is to see more community energy projects, like this one. There are 900 shareholders in this single wind turbine across the UK who, over the 2.5 years that it's been built, have saved about £1,300 off their bill. The kind of payback the government is hoping will sweeten the deal around a mass rollout of renewables.
More than a third of GB Energy's budget is set aside for this local power plan. Pioneers in the space think it won't just bring financial benefits, but dampen local opposition to whirling blades or glaring solar panels.
By giving people the opportunity to actually own the wind farm or the solar park that is being built in their community, we think that can really, really help people, welcome new projects with open arms.
Tim Blanche, one of the shareholders, has saved hundreds of pounds on his bill during a time of high gas prices.
It does change your attitude towards the whole thing because you're interested in it and you have a sense of belonging to it.
But the government's plans require clean power equivalent to tens of thousands of these turbines, as well as hundreds of miles of new pylons and an overhauled power grid to deliver it all. Labour has work to do to satisfy voters their race to build low-carbon energy will deliver for them and the economy. But with the UK already experiencing record impacts of climate warming, it's a race worth running. Tom Clark, Sky News, Cheshire.
Well, just before we came on air tonight, I spoke to the Energy Minister, Sarah James. Great to have you on the programme. Thanks for coming on.
Hello.
You're here to talk about GB Energy. I'm ashamed to say, kind of grappling with what it is and what it's going to do. And at this point, I'm not sure if that's a me problem or a you problem, right? So you say GB Energy will own, manage and operate clean power projects.
Yes.
It will be a company that will generate energy in its own right.
Yes.
So what does manage and operate mean? Does that mean that GB Energy is going to be an energy supplier, so you can get them to supply your heating and electricity?
So you won't be buying your energy directly from GB Energy. That is something that a whole different set of companies do. Where GB Energy will be is in the business of generating the energy in the first place. So I think it's a really significant day today, I should say, the publishing of the bill to set up GB Energy, for it to be independent, for it to be based in Scotland, for the Secretary of State to have the powers to instruct it and set its strategic direction. But if you look at what we're also announcing today, the relationship between GB Energy and the Crown Estate, I think that gives an example of some of the types of things that GB Energy will be doing. So at the moment, Crown Estate own all the seabed, and we want to see lots more offshore wind, floating offshore wind. So we've got this partnership with the Crown Estate where we will go in and we will help to do the planning, to set up the grid connections, to help with the study of the seabed, because you've got to look at marine life and all kinds of things like this, so that when we go to the private sector and say, are you interested in being involved in offshore wind or floating offshore wind, we've already created an answer for them in terms of putting those grid connections in, putting the planning in and doing the analysis. So it will be a much more attractive proposition to the private sector. And we think with this relationship, I should just say, that we could crowd in £60 billion of private sector investment.
On the Crown Estate, because you're kind of touting it as the answer to all of this, if you like, and making legal changes so it can borrow, use land, etc., etc. Could you expand its remit to cover housing, for example, which means meeting a 1.5 million homes target on time?
Well, this relationship is about GB Energy. So this relationship is different. It is focused on what we can do with offshore
in theory,
wind.
expand it to other targets that are very important to this government, like housing?
So the bill at the moment, there's two bills. One is setting up Great British Energy. The other is giving powers to the Crown Estate. And there will be the ability, for example, for them to buy all the digital kit they need to look at the offshore wind, the seabed, the marine seabed.
Yeah, I know
so they'll be able
that's
to
not
buy
quite answering my question, which
kit.
is about housing.
They do housing, they can invest, they will be able to borrow and invest. Their asset base is £16 billion, and a lot of that is land as well as sea. So they do own a lot of property, and they will be able to, on the back of the value of those assets, they'll be able to borrow and they'll be able to invest.
OK. One of the... this is obviously one of your big things about to try and push your climate change agenda. One of the big voices in GB Energy is Chris Stark, who, of course, used to work at the Climate Change Commission. Now, they released a report last week saying only a third of the emissions reductions required to achieve your 2030 target are currently covered, in their words, by credible plans.
Yes.
I mean, that's a blow to you, isn't it?
Or
have they got it wrong?
It's really stark, and I think it's not dissimilar to quite a lot of what we are seeing in government departments in terms of promises made where there just wasn't the infrastructure, the policy, the money to fulfil those promises. And we are going to have to work really hard to meet these challenges. Now, what we are saying...
You're blaming the Conservatives for what they're reporting now, then?
So we're not as ready as we should be. That is absolutely true. And we know that applies across all kinds of different policies, all kinds of different situations we've inherited from this government. But we believe if government is using all the levers at their that they can, that we can get to a point of clean power by 2030. Now, the point of this isn't just, and this is really important, isn't just about climate. It's about giving people more money in their pockets. It's about making sure they have more agency, better jobs, better skills. It's a whole raft of policies to make people's lives better, which is the only point of this government.
So you're talking about using all of the levers to get there, and you admit that, you're not in the place that you need to be to meet those targets. So why on earth, then, did the ban in new petrol and diesel cars, why wasn't that not in the King's speech? So in your manifesto, wasn't it, that you pledged to restore it, to 2030, but then it didn't make it into the speech?
So it is undoubtedly true that the government's change of position a few months ago that meant that car companies had been told they had to reach a certain target and then all of a sudden they had to reach a different one. It is undoubtedly true. That has had a really bad impact on those car companies, without question. And we've seen that in some of the results today from some of the manufacturers of automotives. And we need to fix that. We need to reach our targets, which is still our intention, absolutely. But we are working with all the manufacturing companies, all the car manufacturers, to make sure this is possible. Because, look, we know we have to get to electric vehicles. We know that that is the way that it has to be done. But when you've got one hand tied behind your back because you've had a government saying to people, oh, actually, you don't need to buy them yet.
You're not using all the levers of government, though, are you? That's my question. You're saying that, the only way we can get to those targets is if we use all the levers of government. Well, there is a whopping great big lever there on, petrol and diesel cars, and you're not pulling it.
So this is still our policy. What I will say is I'm the automotive minister. We have been having meetings virtually every day in the last 3 weeks looking at how can we pull the right levers, because you have unintended consequences if you do one thing and you end up with the car manufacturers doing something else, like restricting the supply of diesel and petrol cars, for example, in order to meet. So these are difficult tasks, but it is true that the government has made this situation much worse, that we have quite a lot that we need to try and fix, but the automotive industry is just as much a part of the transition as all the other industries, and we are going to use absolutely every lever to make sure we make people better off, give them good jobs, give them skills, opportunities, and that's the only purpose that we have in government.
OK. A big thing that I'm sure many of our viewers, including me, feeling quite excited about is the Olympics and the start of the Olympics. It's the opening ceremony, of course, very shortly. They're doing it a bit differently this year, along the Seine rather than in the Olympic Stadium, like many people have done previously. Question marks about protests and security. What's Keir Starmer's plans? Is he going to go to the ceremony?
Oh gosh, I have.
Do you know?
I don't know whether he is or not. I worked on the Olympics in a previous life in 2012, and I think everybody says that it was pretty much the most spectacular moment we've had as a country, and that's where we want to get back to. But whether the Prime Minister has time to go, I'm sure he absolutely wants to. I'm sure he will if he can. He loves sport, as you know, and I'm sure he'll love to go. But whether he's going or not, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, you've got your Olympics hat on, and obviously your kind of Home Office hat as well. Do you think it would be a bit of a security risk to do it along the Seine?
Well, I know that when we did the Olympics in 2012, it was a moment where government departments worked so well together that we had mapped out every single possible security risk, because we had sport in all kinds of different venues across the country. We had the torch going all around the country, so there were huge risks, but we managed them by working really well together. We've got real expertise in this country, and it's difficult. Obviously, the world is a different place. We have a lot of dangerous geopolitical situations, but I'm sure that all the different countries that are competing with the Games, they all work together on security.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My interview there with Sarah Jones. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. As two Just Stop Oil activists are convicted of criminal damage, I'll speak to a man who's helped to fund the protests to get his views on the prison sentences being handed down. Thousands of prisoners are set for early release to ease overcrowding as levels of violence and self-harm soar. Robert Jenrick joins the race to run for Conservative Party leader, the third candidate to throw their hats in the ring.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
Hello, welcome back. A little earlier, I spoke to Dale Vince, a green energy entrepreneur and Labour donor, so let's hear a little about what he had to say. Thank you very much for being on Politics Hub. It's great to have you. Now, I've interviewed you a few times. I know how excited you've been about the prospect of a Labour government. What do you make of how Keir Starmer's done so far?
I'd say very well. It's barely 3 weeks since we went to the polls. We've seen a string of announcements. Labour have moved very fast and very boldly, I would say, unbanning onshore wind straight away, easing the path for some big solar projects as well, banning bee-killing pesticides. That's been an issue for too long in our country. And a raft of other things, the announcement of GB Energy and Energy Independence Bill. I mean, it's a long list for less than 3 weeks already in government.
You mentioned GB Energy, which is obviously a big part of their green agenda. Do you think they're putting enough money into it to really make a difference?
At this stage, I would say yes, because the focus is on offshore wind. We've seen that with the announcement today, teaming up with Crown Estates, very sensible move. They own the seabed, and normally they will rent the seabed to developers that then pursue planning permission and take quite a lot of risk, and it adds to the cost of the energy that ends up coming from offshore windmills. What Labour are planning to do now is to take projects through the planning process and actually capture the value in that step for the public. And I hope go further, actually build the projects ourselves as a nation and own them. And that's a brilliant move. This is how we get to have the real benefits from our natural resources, the wind and the sun, in fact, and keep them for our country in perpetuity, actually. So but the big money will be needed once we've got planning permission, just to come back to the point. Then we need many billions of pounds. But government have pledged 8 billion this Parliament, and if that was used with debt the way we do in the private sector, then it would be possible to raise 70 or 80 billion in total to spend on offshore wind farms, using just the 8 billion of seed money from the government.
Now, there's one thing that I wanted to get your perspective on, because I know this is something that you'll have thought about quite a lot. You know, Labour wants economic growth, but there are some environmentalists who think that growth is not necessarily a good thing for the environment, that, you know, since the Industrial Revolution, it's actually been tied to bad outcomes for the environment, you know, increased climate change, environmental degradation. What's your own view on the pursuit of economic growth?
I think we've had several industrial revolutions, actually, and this is the latest one that we're just about. It's underway, I would say. And they've all lifted an immense amount of people out of poverty. Yes, there have been bad impacts that have come with it too, but this industrial revolution can put right the problems of the previous ones, the climate crisis and stuff like that. I also think we can get social justice this way. We can become a sustainable country, but we've got to build this green transition. It won't just appear itself. And so we do have to have all of the activities that will lead to economic growth to get to 100% green on the grids, gas and electricity, and a more sustainable nation this year.
I guess,
by way of example.
I guess that the thing I'm trying to get to on economic growth is there are clearly things that Labour's doing that would help growth and help the environment, and I absolutely take your point about lifting people out of poverty, the social impact as well. But if you are making your number one priority the pursuit of growth, which it feels to me like Labour is doing right now, then some of the things appear to be growth first and the environment second. You know, changing the nutrient neutrality rules so developers can start building houses that risk polluting rivers, reviewing the green belt, housing targets in general. You know, are you comfortable with all these things?
I haven't seen the neutrality one. I am comfortable that we change rules to enable more house building because we have a real crisis in our country, a shortage of houses, incredibly high prices, people waiting to be in their 30s before they can get on the housing ladder and stuff like that, and a lot of homeless people. We don't have a shortage of land, and only 15% of our entire country is built environment. So there's no problem there. So I'm keen on that one. I think the growth that Labour overall are pursuing is green growth, and I think that's a good thing. We need it anyway. It's how we get the jobs and fight the climate crisis all at the same time. That's a wonderful combination. But it is important that houses are built in a way that doesn't impact the local environment.
I mean, you're the sort of big, environmental crusader. Here you are talking about, actually growth can be a good thing, that house building is a good thing. Have you gone a bit soft?
No, I've always cared about the housing market. It's so wrong. And the private rented sector is a crime, actually, that it's not regulated. The people in the private rented sector live in incredible, what would you call it, housing poverty. We used to talk about mortgage poverty, where people spend a lot of their income on their mortgage, but at least they're buying a piece of their own house. In the private sector, it's worse, and they're not buying anything, just a roof over their head for a temporary period of time. So, there is a real problem in our country with a lack of house building, and green growth through building, green energy, for example, is so good for us. Twice as many jobs, twice the GDP growth for every pound we spend on green energy versus fossil fuels. So from my point of view, it's not a difficult choice at all. We should pursue the green economic opportunity and create for ourselves a sustainable country.
One big prickly decision that gets to the heart of this that could be coming up for the government is Heathrow. Whether or not there should be a third runway at Heathrow. What's your view on that?
Is it third or fourth?
Maybe it's fourth.
You could.
I thought it was third. Maybe it is fourth.
I don't know. You might be right.
Check my notes.
Right. You're probably right. You must know. Maybe, anyway, well, I'll just answer the question as if you're right, because I'm sure you are.
I think it is third.
Third, yeah, great. But I'm looking forward to seeing Boris Johnson laying down in front of the bulldozers if Keir Starmer does give consent to the third runway. But more seriously, I don't think it should happen. I don't think that we need to expand the aviation sector in our country. 50% of people in our country never fly. It's a false narrative that we need more runways and more planes so that people can have cheap holidays, because most of the flights are taken by just 10% of people in our country. And there are other ways to do business. We've learned that obviously through the pandemic with video calls and stuff like that, like we're having now. So I'm against runway airport expansion, actually.
And then just finally, I want to talk to you about Just Stop Oil, because we obviously saw some members of Just Stop Oil being given some pretty hefty jail sentences for protesting, including the founder, Roger Hallam, given 5 years. Now, this is going to split viewers. Some people think that's ludicrous because, there were non-violent protests. There'll be others who think, people missed ambulance appointments. People missed, huge, saying goodbye to their, loved ones who were dying. And actually, it is right to send a message to people who will keep offending otherwise. What's your own view on it?
Well, the things you described there, I think, were things that happened during lockdown in the pandemic. I wasn't aware that they happened when, the M25 was disrupted for a short period of time. But look, my view is this: 5 years for taking part in a Zoom call to talk about disrupting the M25. That's what Roger Hallam got. I think that's exceptionally bad. I have to ask myself, where do we live? Is it Russia or North Korea or somewhere like that? If this sentence had been handed down in Russia, our politicians would be quick to criticize it. It is overly harsh, and it was legislation brought in by the Tory administration just before they lost the last election. I think something should be done. The law should be changed. It should be repealed, and the sentences should be reviewed. It's incredible. If you commit GBH in our country, you won't get 5 years probably in prison.
Thank you very much indeed. Always good to have you on the programme, delve into there. Thank you. Well, we're talking an awful lot this evening about what the new Labour government is doing. It feels right to reflect on what the Conservative Party is up to as well, because this will be one of the big stories for the summer. Who is going to be the new leader? Because today, Robert Jenrick has joined the race. He is the third Conservative to throw their hat into the ring to replace Rishi Sunak as leader of the party. For a bit more on this, we're joined now by our political correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. So then there were three.
Yeah, there are three. I'll just explain to you exactly where we're at. As you said, three candidates have now thrown their hats into the ring to be leader. James Cleverly, the former Home Secretary, and the former Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, announced their intention earlier this week. And now Robert Jenrick, the MP for Newark and a former immigration minister, has announced that he is also running. He's been nominated...
There we go.
Yeah, there you go, all three of them there. Robert Jenrick, he's being nominated by Danny Kruger, the right-wing MP who's taking on the role of his campaign manager. Now, all three of them are using the language of unity. They're trying to present themselves as the unity candidate in recognition of the splits and divisions that have plagued the party over the last few years. But they are coming at it from quite different camps. So Jenrick, you may remember, he quit Sunak's government in protest against the Rwanda asylum scheme, arguing that it wasn't going far enough. His kind of natural home is among the right-wing MPs who feel that the threat of Reform UK needs to be neutralised by shifting the party further to the right. And then we've got Tom Tugendhat. He's kind of seen as more of a moderate candidate. He wants to curry favour among the One Nationers. But he's also been making overtures to the right in recent days by suggesting that he would be prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, a real dividing line for those on the right of the party. So he wrote an article in The Telegraph yesterday saying that kind of controlling our borders was the most important thing, that he would be prepared to kind of leave institutions that kind of prevent that from happening. But it's not going to be easy for him because he's fishing in the same pool as James Cleverly, who's also seen as another centrist candidate. Now, that's probably not going to be the end of it. We've probably got more candidates who will reveal their intention to run in the next few days, including these four. So Kemi Badenoch, the former business secretary, very much seen as a front runner in this contest, although she's been quite tight-lipped at the moment. Mel Stride, former Work and Pension Secretary, and Suella Braverman.
Urged to run. Yeah. I love that's my favourite thing. I was just urged to run by so many of my colleagues.
We need the backing of at least 10 MPs, as CV gets it. And Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, she's really lost a lot of steam in the past few months. She was hoping to count on the right wing of her party, but key figures, as I said, like Danny Kruger, have thrown their support behind Robert Jenrick. So we'll see what happens there. And Priti Patel, who's really popular in the grassroots of the Tory party, a real Boris Johnson loyalist, is also another one that's been pencilled in to run. Now, nominations, they all have to be handed in by Monday, and they need the backing of at least 10 MPs in order to run. The parliamentary party will then whittle them all down to 2, and then the Tory membership will make the final decision, and the winner will probably be announced on November the 2nd.
Thanks very much for the analysis. So 3 in the race so far. I should say, though, that 7 of the leadership packs have been given out. So I think we can read between the lines that there may be a few more candidates in the race. Gurpreet, thank you very much indeed. Well, the latest on the Conservative leadership, I'm sure, will be featuring in tomorrow's papers, all those nuances as well. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Sam Shah. Right. Let's bring in our duo again, shall we? Nick and Dawn are still with us, I have to say. So there we've got 3 out of the blocks. Dawn, which one are you most fighting?
I mean, I can only tell you... I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. I think it's going to be very entertaining to watch. I can only tell you the one that I wouldn't like. And actually, to be fair, I thought that was a pretty rough picture of her. I think there's better pictures out there. But I think Suella would be like a disaster. But I understand from the grapevine for some of the Tories that she wouldn't get the 10 nominations anyway.
It's interesting. So she may be kind of running out of steam slightly. Yeah. Robert Jenrick's got in there a bit early, perhaps, and stolen a few.
Go early, go quick, go early. You know, get people on board. So,
get in there.
But I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to getting some popcorn and just sitting back.
Nick, what do you think?
Well, I would imagine being in the Conservative Party at the moment is about as much fun as taking in rehearsals for Strictly Come Dancing without the fake tan. That's what it's like being there. So what does it really matter? They have got a hell of... No, just occurred to me, actually. They've got a hell of a challenge. And let's not forget the story in the papers today, right? Which is that reform, Nigel Farage reform, got more young vote than the Conservatives did, OK? Now, when you're young, like Dawn, you're allowed to vote for Labour or Lib Dem. It's absolutely fine when you're a young person. As you get older and you get wiser and more mature, you normally move towards a party such as the Conservative Party. The fact
And
that
then you go back.
and then you go back. The fact that Reform outdid them in this month's general election is a major concern. So whoever the man or woman is, I mean, my God, have they got some challenges to face. But that is what they have, and let's face it, Conservatives are never known for a massive youth vote. But whatever they did have, they've lost. And that is a huge challenge as you rebuild the party. You have to ask, sorry, Sophie, just briefly, whoever wins, and, you know, obviously I've interviewed all of them, as, you know, we all know them, I just wonder if it's going to be the Michael Howard role. Do you know what I mean? The sort of interregnum before you get the man or woman who takes it forward. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you know, it's fine. Interrupt me anytime. It's absolutely no problem at all. Yeah, I think it's interesting as well on that, the people who've run, there's not that many of the kind of the next generation so far, right? When I just wonder if that is because people think, you know what, this is not a leader who's going to win an election. This is, as you say, the Michael Howard role. I'm going to keep my powder dry. I'm not going to put my hat in the ring until next time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them, some of them are really new as well, so they kind of need time to get established and find their feet and know what they're doing. And, you know, hopefully the Tories will be in opposition for quite a few terms. So they've got a lot of time to find their next generation of leader.
And where's
every cloud?
You know? Exactly, you know.
And where's the talk of... Do you remember they talked about 1922 committee, their trade union effectively redoing the rules? Because it looked as though it will be the membership that will again vote for the leader. Well, if you go back a couple of years, you'll remember we had Liz Truss versus Rishi Sunak. The MPs wanted Mr Sunak, the electorate. So you ask again, they were talking about redoing the rules. The one thing I will say about Mr Sunak, credit to him, that he's going to stay there. I'm sure he just wanted to get the hell out of Dodge, and you can hardly blame him. But he is doing the right thing by allowing them to have the most god-awful fight through the summer. She can sit there roaring with laughter and all her friends
getting some
as they just keep taking punches out of each other.
And then he'll be gone. I mean,
I'll be gone.
No, Rishi will.
Oh, right.
He won't stay long after that.
Well, he did say he'll
He
serve
won't. He won't stay the full term. Do you want to bet on it?
Yeah, how much do you
I
want?
mean, I don't bet.
50 quid for charity.
OK, 50 quid for charity that he doesn't stay the term.
Yeah, that's right.
Who else made a bet once?
Me, and I lost that one as well. This programme...
That didn't go very well for him, I have to say.
More than my appearance fee. This is getting ridiculous.
Thanks both very much indeed. Now, MPs have approved legislation to allow thousands of prisoners to be released early to ease overcrowding. Prisons in England and Wales operating at 99% capacity since the beginning of last year. New figures released today show the number rated as being of serious concern has risen by more than a third over the last 12 months. Our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh now reports.
Labour described prisons as a powder keg, ready to blow. Acknowledging an entire system in crisis, it's now their responsibility in government to fix.
If we do not act now and that bomb goes off, our prisons will reach full capacity and the justice system will grind to a halt. This nightmare will become reality by September.
The problem they say they inherited is a prison population that's risen to above 87,000 for the first time, up 13% in just the last 3 years. And figures released today show that nearly a quarter of prisoners live in crowded conditions, the highest it's ever been, with 40% of prisons now rated as either of concern or of serious concern. And with that, deteriorating conditions, prisons in squalor, overrun by drugs, something Vanessa has witnessed much of in her 27 years working inside prisons.
It's a defensive. It's a defensive. I've only drawn it once.
Violence is now at a post-pandemic high, and self-harm rates are the highest since records began.
We need to put some serious money into our prisons. I think, you know, we've got prisons like Wandsworth with sewage, you know, running down landings, raw sewage. And, you know, not only I can see people will say, you know, well, it serves them right, they shouldn't commit the crime. But what about the staff?
Legislation approved today will kickstart the government's plan to release thousands of non-violent prisoners early, starting in September, if they've served 40% of their sentence.
If I was a victim of crime, I'd have anxiety about releasing prisoners back out into society. We need to look at alternatives, and the general public need to be taken along on that journey so as it can be explained to them fully about this isn't being soft on crime. What we're really looking at is to make prisons actually work.
Currently, only 1 in 6 people support the government's plan.
It's not acceptable. Once you've done something, you should do the time for it.
You're letting people get away with things that they shouldn't.
So many people that are in prison probably shouldn't be there. They're there because they have mental health needs.
I don't think there's a choice. And as long as there's no one dangerous released, then I'm OK with it.
This Labour government insists this is an inherited problem, but if their plans fail, it could become a crisis of their own. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News, Westminster.
Still to come on the Politics Hub.
Right, let's get in here.
Who really knows? Who really knows their politics? We will put our panellists to the test with a quiz up against Count Binface.
Oh.
Got a celeb in the room.
Hello, coming up on the UK tonight at 8 o'clock, we'll have the latest from Manchester as a police officer is suspended after being caught on camera stamping on a suspect. Also ahead, the Strictly saga takes another turn as a former professional dancer tells us that she was bullied by another dancer on the show. And we'll be speaking to TV presenter Sophie Morgan about the realities of flying with a disability. All that, much more to come on the UK tonight at 8.
Definitely not playing outside as much as they used to. So there's a report out today, the Red Road Community Play Report, where we've asked 2,000 parents and grandparents about their children's play. And what clearly comes out from that is that over 2/3 of parents and grandparents say their children are not playing out as much as they did when they were children. The number one reason seems to be about safety, particularly road safety, so the ability to get to a space to play. So 1/3 of families say that they don't have a place that they can walk to where their children can play, so a green space or a playground. They don't have somewhere they can walk to easily get to. Some children are walking to school, but way fewer children walk to school than used to.
Is that right?
Yeah, the numbers of children walking to school have declined hugely over the last generation or two. And then at school, there are opportunities for play, but again, we've seen the amount of time that's given to play within schools declining over time as well. You know, things have changed, haven't they, since we were children, and screens and devices now are prolific and lots of children have access to them. But actually, if you ask children, what would you rather be doing? Do you want to see your friends in real life? Do you want to go play with them? Or do you want to stay home and play on your screen? Most children will choose being with other children. But if we don't make outside play opportunities accessible to children so that they can easily get there, so that they're interesting and enjoyable places to play, then of course they're going to choose the device. So I think we need to be really careful about kind of blaming children for spending too much time on devices if we're not creating environments where children can access exciting, interesting play opportunities with other children outside.
So what's your advice to parents and grandparents? What should they do to, what are fun things for kids to do outside?
Yeah, well, firstly, it is just acknowledging that it's hard, but I think it's about balancing that kind of time on screen and time outside. So you might give your child an ice cream over the summer holidays. You're not going to only feed them ice cream. Let them have some screen time, but also try and kind of get them outside. Have a look what's in your local area. Have a look at a map. Is there parks you haven't been to before? Are there places you want to explore? Plan together with your child. What are you excited about doing? How are we going to fit that in? And also, don't be scared to let them get a bit bored. Children are very creative and very resilient, and it's okay sometimes for them to be a bit bored.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our planet. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington, D.C.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, with the new government settling in and after the roller coaster we've just been through with the general election, before we break up for the summer, we thought now is exactly the right time for a political quiz. We love a quiz on the Politics Hub. But this time is a bit different because we're not pitching you against each other. You are on one team.
Oh, right.
Right, let's get in here.
The number of valid ballot papers for each candidate was as follows. Jonathan David Harvey, commonly known as Count Binface, Count Binface Party, 308.
We've got a special guest on the programme this evening who is preparing to take on Dawn and Nick in a quiz just because
Fantastic.
Let's have some applause.
Yes. Binface, one of the sort of breakout stars, you said, the election campaign.
Absolutely. Well, look, this is a day long remembered. Thank you, Sophie. Firstly, I'm on Sky News, on Sophie's show, and Nick Ferrari has endorsed me for US president. So, bring it on.
Doesn't get much better than that, right?
Uncock a hoop.
It doesn't get much better than that. Just because it's, exactly. We thought we'd be a bit of rock and roll this evening. It's
Yes.
it's
Last day of school.
Bit last term
Normally do
vibes.
jigsaws, but you
I'm the Tory. You brought me in.
This is the time in the school year when the teacher puts a video on. So you can plan along at home.
Right.
Binface versus Nick and Dawn.
Say 2 humans versus 1 Binface.
Who's going to win?
We're threatened by you.
Right, here we go. Are we ready for the quiz? Binface, you're going first, OK? Here's your question. The first question is, who won the election, Binface? Was it Labour, the Conservatives, or Plaid Cymru? And how many seats do they get? Do you remember?
I feel vaguely patronised, guys. I don't know about you. I'm going to say that the Labour Party won the election with 412 seats out of 650.
Very good, very good. So the answer there was, of course, the Labour Party did win the election, got that one right. You were paying attention. I think it was technically 411 seats, but I think that's pretty good. I think we'll give that one to you.
It depends on how you... I looked that up deliberately.
There you go. 1 point for Binface. Right, OK, you ready, Dawn?
Yep.
How many political parties stood candidates at the election? Was it A, 34, was it B, 60, or was it C, 98?
How many candidates?
How many political parties? Can't be 98.
It would be 34, isn't it?
I would go for 34.
Yeah.
That was enough.
Yeah.
Well, the
But I suppose the independence is the answer.
Oh, you're telling what each independent counts as his own his or her own person?
Well, there's a lot of independent parties.
You're not counting
small
independents as
parties.
like one block of independents?
No. So
Might be
maybe
60.
a 60.
Yeah, go on then.
60.
The answer's actually 98.
No!
Yes, Binface in the lead, Binface in the lead.
Wow, God.
Right, let's keep going through. Right, Binface, which party leader is the oldest? Keir Starmer, Carla Denyer or Rishi Sunak?
Oh, I know that.
Well, Carla and Rishi, I think, are both quite young. I'm going to say Keir. He's a sexagenarian, isn't he?
Keir Starmer at 61 is the oldest leader.
So now.
Right, here we go. Dawn and Nick. Which is the most common name in this House of Commons? Is it A, Sarah?
I mean, how come he gets those sort of questions? And we're going to get what size shoe?
I'm just looking for myself in the picture.
What size shoe does the speaker take? It's ridiculous.
Sarah, Andrew,
You go
or
for it,
Chris? I don't.
I endorse your question.
Sarah, how many? I can think of 4 Sarahs. How many Andrew? Oh my, this is ridiculous. And how many Chris's? I don't know. I'd say out of Sarah and Andrew.
Go for your life.
Actually, there's more women now than ever before.
What have you
So
said?
let's go for Sarah.
It's Chris.
Oh.
By 2. There was 12 Sarahs, though. Quite a lot of Sarahs.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there was 16 Chris's. Right, Binface. How many Dawns are there in this Parliament?
In Parliament, oh, right.
1, 4, or 7? How many Dawns?
I mean, there were several false dawns in the last one, weren't
Hey!
well, I mean, I'm going to say, because I think Dawn is unique, so in honour of Dawn Butler, I'm going to say there's 1.
There is only 1.
Yes!
There's only one Dawn Butler.
There's only one Dawn Butler.
Right, which of these is something that Binface has pledged in an election? It could be all of them as well. Is it A, to nationalise Adele?
Yeah.
B, bring back CFAX, or C, rename London Bridge?
I used to programme in CFAX, but I think it was Nationalise Adele.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
All right,
I think
I
it was
would have gone
National.
for
Was
CFAX, but
Could be more than 1.
Oh, it could be more than 1.
CFAX. It was all 3.
Correct.
There we go. Thank you for the clue.
All 3. I feel like I needed to help you a little bit.
Get us back in the game.
Right, question 4. Which of these Conservative cabinet members did not lose their seat? Alex Chalk, Grant Shapps.
Who's this for?
Steve Barclay. This is for Binface.
Oh, right, sorry.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think we know Shapsy did, and the other 2 have been very quiet, so it's hard to tell. I'm going to say that Steve Barclay is still in the comments.
That's correct.
Yes.
Binface is absolutely rattling through.
Right.
Well done.
Yeah.
Right, which is the oldest constituency in the UK?
The oldest constituency.
Is it Ross Guy and
You know how much I hate
Lincoln?
quizzes. You know how much I...
Yeah, Lincoln. There we go.
Lincoln.
There we go, Lincoln. I'm taking that. I mean, well done.
We're accidentally highlighting the answers now.
Oh, there we go. Whoa.
Lincoln was electing MPs continuously since 1265. Right, really. Have we got time for any more? Right, Binface. Who was the first MP elected on election night? Angela Rayner, Bridget Phillipson, or Lucy Powell?
You want quick fire? I was watching this, getting ready for my own shindig with Rishi. I think it was Bridget.
Yeah. It was Bridget. Very good. Very good. Right, I think we are out of time on the quiz. I have to say, it was a very good performance by Binface.
Really was.
Very good. Very good.
But all good fun. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Lindsay Hoyle should know what's going on in the house. Well done, Sir Lindsay. Good job.
Binface, can you give us a bit of a hint? What are you going to do next with the political career?
Well, I mean, obviously Nick's put some fire in my belly for the presidency, but I'm also, believe it or not, going on my debut UK comedy tour around the country.
There we go.
So you can, coming to a town or city near you, get a load of old Binface.
There we go.
Sounds good.
There we go. Great to have you both on the programme as well. And that is it from us tonight. And actually, it's it from me for the summer as well. We started the Politics Hub back in September, so it really is still a baby of a show. A lot has happened, of course, since then in the world of politics. I don't need to tell you about that, but thank you for sticking with us through the election, through the formation of the new government. There's going to be a lot more for us to explore in September. You've got Ali Fortescue with you tomorrow at 7 p.m, and I'll see you right back here in September.